laut di zaman sekarang tuh kayak gimana sih? Apa sama aja kayak bajak laut jadul dalam sejarah atau malah lebih ngeri yang sekarang? Terus kenapa ya kalau emang bajak lautnya sebanyak ini, kok rasanya di media tuh kayak kurang kesorot gitu ya? Padahal aktivitasnya tuh banyak banget kan ini kan. Nah kalau menurut Peter Laird, penulis buku Pirates and New History, From Vikings to Somali Riders, disebut di situ sebenarnya selama ini aktivitas bajak laut tuh emang nggak pernah hilang. Mereka selalu ada dari waktu ke waktu, dari dulu sampai sekarang. Cuma ya makin kesini emang makin gak terlalu diperhatiin aja sama media dan perpolitikan barat, karena ya gak terlalu ngaruh ke mereka, gak terlalu ngaruh ke dunia barat. Ya di peta tadi juga kan kelihatan ya, kalau di Eropa dan Amerika Utara bajak lautnya tuh ya dikit banget, malah hampir gak ada. Nah karena dikit banget ini makanya dianggapnya ya gak penting sama pihak barat, termasuk sama medianya. Sebaliknya, di negara-negara lain, terutama yang ada di perairan sekitar ekuator, masalah ini tuh justru mengganggu banget loh. Bajak lautnya tuh justru ngumpulnya di situ. Kenapa ngumpulnya di situ? Ya soalnya perairan di situ tuh emang jalur perdagangan yang penting dan sibuk banget kan. Kalau menurut World Atlas, sebagian besar komoditas perdagangan dunia tuh kan masih pakai jalur laut ya buat ngangkut dan ngedistribusiin barang-barang dari satu negara ke negara lain atau dari satu benua ke benua lain. Dan rute-rute laut utama dunia tuh adanya di wilayah Asia Tenggara, Samudra Pasifik sekitar Mediterania, Afrika Barat, sama Amerika Tengah. Ya makanya bajak laut sekarang tuh ngumpulnya di sana, di tempat-tempat yang sering dilewatin sama kapal-kapal komersil. Ngumpulnya di jalur-jalur perairan yang penting mereka.
Thailand's military are armed and ready to combat pirate attacks. Preparation is one of the best strategies to prevent a clash on the open seas. The number of such attacks in Asian waters is on the rise, especially up the coast of Indonesia.
Kalau menurut The Way of the Pirates, ada dua jenis, ada dua tipe bajak laut modern. Ada bajak laut kecil-kecilan sama bajak laut terorganisir. Bajak laut kecil-kecilan biasanya mereka lebih tertarik buat ngejar kapal kecil. Mereka ngambilin uang atau barang-barang milik awak kapalnya. Ya mirip-mirip sama bajak laut zaman dulu lah ya. Dan mereka yang kecil-kecil ini tujuan ngebajaknya ya biar barang atau uang hasil jarahannya itu bisa mereka pakai sendiri atau dibagiin ke orang-orang di desa. Itu bajak laut yang kecil. Kalau bajak laut terorganisir, mereka ini pembajak yang punya kaitan sama kelompok atau pihak lain. Tujuan mereka nyerang kapal yang biasanya kapal-kapal komersil besar, yaitu tuh sebagai bisnis mereka. Jadi bajak laut yang besar yang terorganisir ini, mereka tuh biasanya tuh punya kaitan langsung sama kelompok kriminal yang lebih besar. Atau bisa juga sama pejabat korup setempat, atau bisa juga sama kapten kapal yang bakal dijarah, yang bakal dibajak. Jadi ya itu yang dimaksud bisnis mereka tuh itu. Mereka ngelakuin kerjaan kotor yang dipesan sama pihak lain. Dan kalau menurut gue yang paling menarik di sini tuh kan poin yang terakhir tadi tuh ya. Mereka ada kaitannya sama kapten kapal yang mereka bajak. Jadi ini kalau menurut jurnal dari Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime disebut di beberapa kasus justru kapten-kapten kapal komersilnya sendiri yang menghubungin para bajak laut buat ngejar kapal yang mereka bawa. Khususnya ya kapal-kapal besar di sini. Di situ si kapten bakal ngasih informasi tentang kapal apa yang dipakai, ngebawa komoditi apa, dan lewat jalur mana. Kenapa kaptennya gitu? Ya apalagi, soalnya kapten-kapten ini pengen duit tambahan. Jadi ya kong kali komaninya mereka sama si penjara. Jadi ya kayak, bajak laut, kalau lu ngebawa kapal minyak biasanya dapat untung berapa? Besok gua mau ngebawa kapal minyak nih soalnya nih. Nanti lu tungguin kapal gua di laut situ ya, siap-siap bajak tuh. Tapi jangan lupa, ntar untungnya bagi dua. Gitulah kira-kira. Dan di sini posisi si kapten kapal ini cukup aman nih. Soalnya kalaupun kapalnya dibajak, kerugiannya itu bakal ditanggung sama asuransi kapalnya kan. Jadi ya ketika kapalnya dibajak, si kapten tuh aman-aman aja, nggak akan rugi dia walaupun kapal yang dia bawa dibajak sama orang. Malah di belakang dia dapat untung lebih kan. Busuk juga ini kaptennya ya.
Orang-orang dari di Kepri ini rompaknya beda karena mereka berurusan dengan perut ekonomi yang miskin dari daerah Palembang atau Sumatera Selatan. Itu yang lebih ganas. Kalau mereka yang dari Sumatera Selatan itu memang terkait dengan jaringan internasional.
Nah, kalau menurut Pais, bajak laut modern tuh mereka tuh lebih sering beroperasi di selat-selat yang sempit daripada di lautan lepas. Soalnya aktivitas kapal di selat tuh lebih menguntungkan banget buat para bajak laut ini. Kenapa bisa lebih menguntungin? Jadi gini, perairan yang sempit yang dihimpit pulau-pulau atau daratan, itu tuh ngebikin kapal besar jadi susah buat kabur atau menghindar. Laju kapalnya juga, speed kapalnya juga nggak bisa cepet-cepet nih, karena rutenya sibuk kan. Banyak kapal lain nggak jauh dari mereka. Dan karena inilah makanya kebanyakan aksi pembajakan gini tuh terjadinya di perairan yang dekat sama daratan, terutama ya di selat. Terus yang dilakuin sama bajak lautnya ketika membajak juga beda-beda nih ya. Ada yang cuma ngejar harta atau barang-barang pribadi awak kapalnya, ada yang malah nyuri bahan bakar kapalnya, ada yang ngejar komoditi kapal kontainer buat dijual lagi. Ada juga yang berkaitan sama aktivitas jual beli narkoba, ada yang awak kapalnya diculik buat dimintain tebusan, ada yang berkaitan sama aktivitas terorisme, sampai ada juga yang awak kapalnya disuruh turun, terus kapalnya dibawa ke dermaga, terus dicat sama didekor ulang tuh kapalnya tuh, biar bisa dijual lagi. Dan yang gini-gini biasanya mereka nih berkoalisi sama pejabat setempat nih, makanya mereka tenang-tenang aja ngebawa dan ngejual kapal ilegal di pelabuhan. Bener-bener mereka nggak takut ditangkap tuh, karena ya udah dijamin aman. Paling ntar sih ngejual kapalnya dibagi dua tuh sama si pejabat tadi, pejabat yang udah ngelancarin urusan jual beli kapal ilegal mereka. Jadi keinget titik-titik aktivitas bajak laut tadi kan banyak yang di Indonesia ya. Ini kan berarti
Nggak mungkin lah, masa pejabat daerah yang di sana kerja sama bajak laut? Nggak mungkin itu kan, bersih semua pejabat di Indonesia kan, nggak ada yang korup kan.
today tugboats seems to be the prime target. Two main reasons. One is that tugboats are usually very slow moving, and there is a second-hand market today for tugboats to be repainted and resold. Nah, tapi kalau kita ngomongin aktivitas bajak laut yang banyak di Indonesia atau Asia Tenggara, ya jalur laut Asia Tenggara kan emang jadi salah satu rute tersibuk di dunia kan, terutama di Selat Malaka sama Selat Singapura. Yang gimana nggak paling sibuk? Komoditas dari Cina, Jepang, Korea, dan negara-negara Asia Tenggara kalau mau dibawa ke Timur Tengah, Afrika sama Eropa, itu kan pasti lewat selat-selat ini kan. Lu bayangin aja nih, kalau menurut Time, setiap tahunnya ada lebih dari 120.000 kapal yang melintasi selat-selat ini. Dan ya ini pastinya jadi potensi sumber percuanan dong buat para bajak laut. Makanya banyak banget bajak laut yang ngumpul di sekitar perairan ini jadinya. Kalau menurut International Maritime Bureau disebut, hampir 60% dari semua serangan bajak laut yang terjadi di dunia antara tahun 1993 sampai 2015 itu tuh terjadinya di perairan Asia Tenggara dengan total korban tewas mencapai 136 orang. Dan gilanya nih, secara keseluruhan 20% serangan bajak laut global tuh terjadinya di negara kita loh, terjadinya di Indonesia loh. Dan makanya itu ngejadiin Indonesia sebagai negara paling rawan bajak laut di dunia menurut laporan PBB tahun 2014. Ini kan anjir ya. Padahal di era modern tuh kan yang paling terkenal tuh kan bajak laut Sumatera.
apa? Oh ya kak, iya kak sudah selesai. Saya ganti semua versi Windowsnya kak. Ya. Kayaknya ada kak. Misalnya ini mau kasih connect dulu printer saya di sana lagi kak sama data saya. Ya. Boleh kak.
Alia kan? Ternyata
Baik kak. Iya kak.
Betul sudah pertanyaan Pak?
Apa itu?
Betul sudah pertanyaan?
Itu tanda kemarin. Nah kemarin lupa setelah suruh install ulang Windows.
Sudah selesai.
Buat sampai. Ada ini mau nih pak. Cobain sudah tuntut terus kilo sana pak. Besok saya pause DP sampai 1 tahun ke depan. Semoga dong bisa pakai Windows ini.
Duduk bersama itu lapang, duduk sendiri itu sempit. Ini kalimat sepertinya aneh. Duduk sendiri yang lapang, duduk yang ramai sempit. Ternyata kesempitan hati ini terasa lapang. Dengan bersama mereka, maka dengan pernah hidup sendiri, duduklah bersama akan terasa lapang.
kata angkanya masih kalah loh sama Indonesia loh. Kenapa ini dibilang nggak blow up ya?
For piracy and taken into custody. So all 7 were apprehended, and we found several tools as well as knives belonging to the robbers. Upon investigation, they are Indonesians. They were from Batam.
Nah, kalau menurut The Conversation, salah satu alasan kenapa mereka nggak ke blow up, kemungkinan besar karena bajak laut Indonesia itu sebagian besar masih amatir. Mereka tuh masih bajak laut kecil-kecilan yang ngebajak kapal ukuran kecil sampai sedang doang. Barang-barang yang mereka ambil juga tuh biasanya barang pribadi awak kapalnya, kayak uang, HP, laptop, ya pokoknya barang-barang yang sekiranya bisa dipakai atau dijual lagi lah. Jadi bajak laut Indonesia tuh kebanyakan senjatanya nggak secanggih bajak laut yang terorganisir, yang pada bawa senapan gitu. Enggak, kalau Indonesia nggak gitu. Bajak laut Indonesia tuh mereka lebih sering kelihatan bawa parang atau golok. Jarang banget tuh ada yang bawa senjata jarak jauh kayak pistol atau sejenisnya gitu. Tapi walaupun cuma bawa senjata seadanya, masih menurut The Conversation, bajak laut ini mereka pede-pede aja di sini. Mereka nggak takut buka ataupun mati karena udah dibekelin sama air yang udah dijamin-jamin sama dukun setempat. Jadinya ya mereka di sini ngerasa aman, kan udah punya ilmu kebal kan. Nah, iki. Terus mereka juga percaya kalau air ajaib dari dukun ini bisa ngebikin kapal mereka tuh nggak kelihatan. Makanya makin mudah tuh buat ngebajak kapal lain tuh. ini di Indonesia nih ada kolaborasi antara bajak laut sama perkebunan ya. Mantap. Ini kan jatuhnya apa berarti ya? Ngebajak kapal asing dengan kearifan lokal kan? Terus kalau menurut Information Fusion Center disebut masyarakat desa sekitar tempat bajak laut lokal ini beroperasi juga, mereka tuh merasa nggak keberatan sama penjarahan yang terjadi di sekitar perairan mereka. Soalnya di sini ketua dari kelompok bajak laut ini tuh seringnya malah dianggap murah hati karena sering ngasih warga desa dana bantuan buat ngebangun infrastruktur atau tempat ibadah dari hasil jarahan mereka. Makanya jadinya warga desa tuh malah open banget sama bajak lautnya, diterima tuh kehadiran bajak laut sama warga desa, bukannya malah dilaporin, karena ya itu orang malah ngebantuin mereka kan.
Even though most recent attacks of Indonesia are considered low-level robberies, authorities will have to address the issue to ensure trade routes remain safe.
Tapi walaupun sebagian besar bajak laut di Indonesia itu bajak laut kecil dan amatir, tapi ya bukan berarti nggak ada bajak laut terorganisir di kita ya. Karena ya balik lagi, potensi jalur perdagangan laut di Indonesia itu kan untungin banget ya. Jadi tetap ada aja tuh yang nargetin kapal-kapal komersil besar buat dibajak. Selain di Selat Malaka, pembajakan di Laut Sulawesi sama Laut Sulu tuh juga sering terjadi nih. Terus pemerintahnya ngediemin aja apa gimana? Nah, kalau menurut International Affairs Review, sebenarnya pemerintah negara-negara bersangkutan sama organisasi internasional juga, mereka tuh sebenarnya udah ngelakuin berbagai upaya buat memberantas aktivitas bajak laut ini. Tapi ya usaha ini nggak bisa maksimal, karena kan butuh tenaga kerja yang banyak dan dana yang besar banget kan. Buat ngoperasiin kapal patroli sama pasukannya aja kan nggak murah itu, apalagi kalau harus ke lautan lepas kan. Dan buat kita, buat negara seluas Indonesia, ya jelas ini butuh banyak banget kapal-kapal patroli yang ditugasi. Tapi ternyata di sini Indonesia sendiri, bareng sama negara-negara lain yang tergabung di Regional Cooperation Agreement on Combating Piracy and Armed Robbery Against Ships in Asia, atau disingkat RCEP, mereka nih ternyata udah berhasil mengurangi jumlah serangan bajak laut yang terjadi loh. Nih, kalau menurut Statista, di tahun 2015 ada 108 serangan bajak laut yang terjadi di Indonesia. Tapi terus angka ini turun drastis, jadi cuma 10 serangan doang di tahun 2022 kemarin. Ini turunnya nyampe 90% nih berarti nih. Keren juga ya. Tapi tetap secara internasional 10 serangan yang tercatat tuh masuknya ya tetap banyak sih. Karena Indonesia tuh tetap ada di posisi 3 teratas negara dengan serangan bajak laut terbanyak di dunia. Tapi ya kalau buat ngebasmi bener-bener sampai nggak ada bajak laut sama sekali, buat sekarang-sekarang itu dirasa masih nggak mungkin sih. Karena kan ingat, sebagian besar komoditas perdagangan tuh masih dibawa pakai jalur laut kan. Jadi ya buat kedepannya bajak laut tuh masih bakal terus ada, karena mangsanya juga masih ada kan, mangsanya juga masih di laut kan.
Last year, pirates again managed to attack a tanker in the Strait of Malacca, not far from Singapore. Most of the time, pirates aim for large ships carrying valuable freight.
Oke, sekian Rembe Googling kali ini tentang bajak laut modern dan aktivitasnya di Indonesia. Yang ternyata salah satu yang paling tinggi di dunia ya kita ya. Edan juga nih. Kalau lu mau revisi ke gue udah salah, atau lu nanya, atau lu nambahin yang gak ada di video, bisa tulis di komen, kita diskusi lebih biasa. Sekali lagi, thank you, nonton, jangan lupa like, comment, subscribe. Bye.
Setelah sukses besar tahun lalu, kini cara membuat Indonesia.
Gua aja kayak nonton The TV, bukannya gua ngantuk wah. Prabowo sudah menang ya, secara quick count. Respect calon menteriku.
Di istana mereka berebut kursi, dugaan kecurangan sana sini, kekerasan di Boyolali, mahasiswa disomasi, mengkritik dibui. Ini pesta demokrasi apa pesta demokrasi? Close the door.
Kalau belum bisa belum tentu dikira. Ini main hati nih. Apa? Bener kan menang. Happy. Saya mah siapapun yang
acara itu lapor dulu juga udah selesai kan. Paling sekarang lagi nyari curang gitu doang kan. Biasalah kalau udah ada yang menang biasanya ada maling grab warga. Maling grab maling.
Maling grab mahal.
Ada maling ada warga. Warga yang lari dong.
Kalau nyari yang curang mending di sini, di tepi curang.
Tapi curang.
Kasihkan aja.
Aman.
Kan balik lagi nih kita dulu lah.
Balik lagi.
Pamit dulu ya, aku Ate.
Aku lagi.
Kami dari Ate.
Kita mau buka acara ya.
Oh, belum buka acara? Acara iya.
Tapi buka acara ya. Kalau puasa sih tiba-tiba langsung. Kita balik lagi di Somasi Community. Saja ramai-ramai di Somasi. Tema kita kali ini adalah spesial pemilu.
Pemilu damai dah, damai dah.
Ya nggak terlalu damai. Damai tapi dibandingkan sebelumnya pemilu kali ini damai, pesta rakyat.
Pesta rakyat. Bertepatan dengan Valentine.
Iya, pas. Ya nggak semua rakyat pesta juga.
Kasih sayang. Kalau kemarin gue tuh pengen banget ngomongin kasih sayang karena pas banget sama hari
Cewek lu dong.
Gue kuat, gue pengen ngomongin. Nah, tapi beneran gue pengen banget. Apa? Biar gue kasih coklat, sebenarnya dia teriak, so sweet, so sweet. Jangan tahu. Dia kan
Cuma coklat. Sorry ya. Malu. Tapi kok nggak mau ikut?
Jumawa ya?
Jadi jumawa kalau gue tuh.
Enggak, karena kan dari kemarin nunggu ya. Semua paslon tuh bikin acara kan. Kayak desak Anies, Sofyan ini. Gelar tikar Ganjar, tabrak Prof Mahfud. Prabowo Gibran sekalian bikin acara langsung deklarasi kemenangan Prabowo Gibran. Kita langsung lihat akbar ya. Langsung. Pengumuman ya. Isinya Gus Meta, di belakang ada Ondet, mana?
Diundang dateng, sama aja kalau ulang tahun gue dateng.
Oh gitu.
Ya gimana yang lain kamu undang?
Oh,
Justru kan sorry ya. Kita mau mengelan apa sih dua-duanya? Enggak, berapa sih? Kurang sih.
Jurang.
Enggak, gue kasih tau ya buat nontonnya. Nah, enggak ada briefing jurang.
Nggak ada.
Enggak ada.
Mereka sendiri yang inisiatif.
Iya, ada kan. Mereka sih. Yang penting lucu. Nah, lucu. Nggak harus jurang, kita nggak harus jurang. Cuman yang menang emang kadang-kadang di jurang.
Sama sih. Kalau nggak jurang mah open mic aja kali. Masih biasa aja.
Masa iya tiba-tiba di panggung sama sih ngomongin soal rendang.
Ya,
Nggak jurang.
Oke lah.
Udah nggak mau ngomong.
Ya. Dan jam-jam gitu gue trauma punya wakil kayak gitu.
Yang pertama
dari Lampung nggak?
dari Lampung ada wakil dari Lampung.
Komiknya.
Wakil waktu itu ada komik yang tiba-tiba dia. Sekalinya mau main dalam ganja. Tapi
Itu siapa?
nggak temen lu.
Oh, yang
Pengen banget. Yang pertama ya. Konsentrasi sih. Ngetik-ngetiknya sembarangan. Komik yang pertama.
ngomongin gak?
Kita langsung masuk komik pertama ya, Tin.
Oke, dari Citerap.
Dari Citerap teman-teman.
Daerah apa nggak Citerap?
Citerap itu dia udah masuk ke Jawa Barat.
Oh, berarti dia nyoblos Bang Komik.
Bang Komik, uhuy, man. Bukan 1 dari 10. Benar.
Padahal dia kampanye gagal.
Nggak ada banner di mana-mana.
Pas buka itu langsung wih, kan gitu.
Iya.
Padahal ya Bang Komik sempet ngindar gitu. Ternyata kagul.
Tapi gua sedih loh. Kenapa, Om? Karena teman gua ada yang bukan 10 dari 10.
Oh, kalau itu mah emang beritanya visi-misi juga kosong.
Iya.
Emang kosong.
Kalau tanya visi-misi lama sih. Gitu. Makanya visi. Tapi setidaknya 9 lah dari 10 gitu.
Kalau gue tanya ketemu Ramzi, gue dari 01. Yang punya 02, dia kosong banget.
Gak ada angkanya ya, gak ada angkanya.
Udah nggak usah.
Oke, langsung aja ya.
Oke,
Dari Citerap, Zen Sandika.
Assalamualaikum. Indonesia butuh pemuda cerdas buat milih. Sayangnya gue nggak cerdas buat milih. Milih tangan terutama. Karena yang biru di sini malah. Udah tegang. Aman, gue nggak golput gitu. Pemilu kemarin tuh alhamdulillah berjalan aman. Dan gue berhasil milih tanpa pengaruh orang luar. Gue milih itu ya benar-benar dari hati nurani, gak kayak orang-orang gitu banyak terpengaruhnya nonton video ini golput, pokoknya ini golput. Maksud gue play dulu videonya baru nonton di thumbnail kan gue apa sih. Ada teman gue nonton videonya Dirty Vote, golput ya. Gue aja nih ya nonton Dirty Vote, bukannya golput, ngantuk gue. Durasinya 2 jam. Maksud gue, mana isinya tuh data-data ya kan berasa kayak ini apa, Zoom sama dosen. Maksud gue 2 jam tuh lama gitu. Mending 2 jam gue itu dipakai buat nonton video YouTube yang lain. Contohnya nonton film actionnya Om Deddy. Film Triangle kan, tahu kan lo? Nah, itu kan enak tuh, seenggaknya gue bisa tidur dari awal film gitu. Emang banyak banget orang yang milihnya tuh aneh banget gitu alasan milihnya. Contohnya siapa? Temannya beliau, temannya Bang Ate. Temannya Bang Ate milih itu karena muka cawapresnya mirip abangnya. Bukan karena gagasan, bukan karena rekam jejak juga, bukan. Tapi karena muka abangnya mirip sama Gibran. Aneh banget emang tuh dulu Kaisang. Kaisang. Tapi ya teman-teman ya, banyak banget gitu yang bilang katanya Pak Prabowo ini juara 1, Mas Anies runner up, Mas Ganjar bingung. Juara 3. Tapi nih yang nggak banyak orang tahu, Pak Ganjar itu menang pemilu, tapi di luar negeri, ya kan? Makanya pas pemilu ini, ya kalahnya jangan kaget. Habis pemilu ini dia sering healing ke luar negeri. Karena cuma di sana dia dianggap presiden. Tapi benar, dia tuh menang hampir 50% lebih suara di luar negeri. Dan gue yakin orang luar negeri itu milih dia bukan karena gagasannya. Karena ya dari semua paslon cuma dia doang yang kayak bule ya kan. Rambutnya putih, coba salah. Bule. Tapi benar gitu, ke DPT luar negeri itu ada sekitar 1.750.000 orang. Dan Pak Ganjar menang 50% lebih. Jadi ada 1 juta suara buat Pak Ganjar, mungkin. Nah, tapi yang Pak Ganjar nggak tahu nih, 1 juta doang kan nggak bisa menangin pemilu ya. Jangankan pemilu nih, lu DPN Mac aja. Angsurannya bisa 5 tahun nih. 1 periode itu. Iya, pas lunas pemilu lagi ya kan. Dan gue senang banget ya bisa tampil di Somasi ini teman-teman. Karena ini adalah langkah keberanian gue tampil di depan umum. Karena ini jujur ya, gue adalah seorang buronan. Hampir setiap malam tuh gue dikejar-kejar polisi. Karena kebetulan bokap saya polisi ya. Motornya saya pinjam 2 hari belum balik gitu. Kamu di mana, kakak? Tapi benar, bokap gue polisi. Dan gue berani bilang kalau bokap gue adalah polisi yang paling jujur. Karena yang banyak bohong gue. Salah satu yang barusan tadi, statement yang barusan tuh tadi tuh. Tapi apa ya, gue sebagai anak polisi itu gak pernah memanfaatkan pekerjaan bokap gue tuh. Gak pernah. Misalkan kalau ditilang, gak pernah. Karena bokap gue pernah ngasih nasihat sama gue. Kakak, siapapun kamu, apapun jabatan kamu di mata hukum semuanya sama. Ya emang sih dia bilang sebelum kasus Sambo ya. Jadi pada saat itu masih relate aja. Tahu kalau sekarang. Tapi benar gitu. Soalnya pernah waktu itu gue bawa motor gak pakai helm, dan yang gue bonceng juga gak pakai helm. Jadi emang kita nih kelihatan salah banget kan. Dan kita ngelewatin raja polisi. Dan entah kenapa gue tuh gak ditilang di situ. Mungkin karena aura anak polisi kan. Dan mungkin juga karena yang gue bonceng bokap gue kali ya. Mana pakai seragam lagi dia. Jadi jelas banget gitu kelihatan polisi. Dan apa ya, bokap gue tuh nggak memaksa gue untuk jadi polisi juga. Bokap gue tuh nggak masalah. Dulu. Sekarang semenjak sepupu gue daftar polisi dan gak terima. Di situ awal muasal bokap gue benci sama gue. Karena pas sepupu gue nih keterima polisi, ini benar-benar efeknya ke gue tuh berpengaruh banget. Apalagi kalau kumpul keluarga tuh. Pernah waktu itu lebaran, kumpul keluarga dong. Sepupu gue yang polisi nih datang, pakai seragam. Bangsat kata gue. Ini gue yang nganggur kayak gini nih, jadi kayak kerasa bener sampahnya. Mana pas dia datang nih ya, itu tante gue, ponakan gue pada nyambut semua. Wah, abdi negara, jadi sambut. Tante gue nih karena lebaran, jadi semua kue-kue dikeluarin. Yang nastar, kue kacang, kue keju nih. Gue udah 2 jam di sana. Yang dikeluarin cuma asbak tuh. Mentang-mentang gue ngerokok, kata gue ya. Bukan nastar ya. Belum lagi nih ya, om gue, ngobrolnya beda banget gitu, mentang-mentang gue nganggur. Om gue nih sama ponakan gue, sepupu gue polisi. Sampai diusap itu pangkatnya sama dia. Sampai nyuruh, kelapin. Ajak ngobrol gimana, daftarnya susah. Jadi obrolannya tuh hidup gitu. Sama gue. Gue lagi duduk di ruang tamu nih. Ya emang sih pas datang dia bawa teh gitu. Ditanya, ada perlu apa? Jadi sangka tamu gue. Gue ya Allah keluarga. Belum lagi nih ponakan gue nih ya. Itu gak support banget. Mentang-mentang dia pakai seragam lengkap. Jadi dikerumunin tuh, dimintain THR. Mentang-mentang gue dia agak penganggur. Sangkanya gue gak punya duit kali. Sedih. Padahal ya gue udah nyiapin 2.000 segepok di tanah. Sampai om gue nukar, HP-nya 2, duit THR kata gue. Pas lebaran dia nyamperin gue. Minta maaf dalam hati gue, sorry ya kan. Dia baru bikin sakit hati gue baru. Masa gue langsung maafin ya kan. Kasih waktu gue buat ngambek lah. Iya nyebelin banget gitu. Untungnya di situ ada bokap gue gitu. Bokap gue yang polisi senior bro. Dia ngepuk-puk pundak gue. Mampus. Gendut sih. Dan ini emang somasi ini emang gue bakal dedikasiin materi gue ini buat bokap gue. Karena benar bokap gue tuh polisi jujur dan sederhana. Kamera. Makanya buat ayah, hormat gue buat ayah. Makasih ya udah ngajarin tentang kesederhanaan. Makasih juga ya udah ngasih contoh polisi baik di tengah-tengah oknum polisi jahat ya. Hormat gue ya buat lo. Nah itu materi titipan teman-teman. Terima kasih. Pengangguran, anak polisi ada yang pengangguran ternyata.
Oh cita-cita aku dulu jadi pengen polisi dulu tuh.
Oh lu tuh, polisi tidur? Polisi apa?
Polisi tidur dinas.
You know, as a tech YouTuber, I find myself telling you guys to back up your servers all the time. And other YouTubers that are in the same space as me, they basically say the same thing. And there's a good reason for that. It's extremely important.
And I'll never understand why so many people out there just, they don't do a good job of backing up their servers. But I know that's not you, because I know you are great at backing up your servers, and I'm going to make it even better, because what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to teach you guys about backups and snapshots in Proxmox. So let's take a look. Alright, so let's take a look at backups and snapshots. As we've gone through the series so far, I've created containers, and I've also created a few virtual machines. Now, to be honest, I don't have all that much going on right now. These particular containers and VMs, all they really include is Apache, and the default Apache configuration is what they have. So all they have is the default start page. But what we're going to do instead is pretend that these are extremely important, and we definitely want to back these up. Now, Proxmox supports both snapshots and backups. We're going to look at both in this video. So what I'm going to do is start with virtual machines, and I'm going to click on this one right here. And you'll notice that we have a backup section here as well as a snapshot section. So what's the difference between a backup and a snapshot? So let me try to explain the difference. So the thing is, a backup is completely separate from the virtual machine. I mean, it's not separate in terms of it being a backup of the virtual machine. It includes everything on the disk because it is actually a full clone of the disk. But you can move this backup to another storage medium, and if you have shared storage, for example, if you have a TrueNAS system on your network, you can actually mount that storage, which we'll be covering later in the series, and send your backups over to that. In addition to that, there's a dedicated Proxmox backup server. That's something that I'm going to be going over in a dedicated video, but I just bring it up because I want you guys to know that it does exist. Now, a snapshot, on the other hand, is actually a part of the virtual machine itself. You can't actually take the snapshot and move it to another system. In fact, snapshots are actually a part of the virtual machine disk, not a clone of the virtual machine disk like a backup is. So you might be wondering when you should use the backup feature and when you should consider using a snapshot. Now, part of that is down to personal preference. In my opinion, a snapshot makes a lot of sense when you want to test a piece of software. You're not really sure how that software is going to behave, or maybe you want to evaluate the software and find out if it's a good fit for the purpose that you are installing it for. In that case, it makes sense to create a snapshot, and then you can test that piece of software. And then if you decide that you don't like it or something like that, you can just revert the snapshot, and it'll be just like you've never installed that particular application. Now, of course, you can just uninstall the application. You don't need a snapshot for that. But sometimes when you install an application and then remove it, there's bits and pieces, basically junk files all over the disk. And even when you uninstall the application, it's possible that some of those files might remain. So snapshots are a really good idea when you're testing something. So let's see a quick example of that. I'm going to take a snapshot of this virtual machine right here. I'll click Take Snapshot. And let's just say I want to remove Apache. I'm going to give this snapshot a name that's going to help me understand exactly what its purpose is. So I'll just name it Before Removing Apache. Simple enough. Now, one thing that I want to call your attention to is this box right here for Include RAM. This is pretty cool. So you can think of this as snapshots on steroids. I mean, normally a snapshot is just a snapshot of the disk. But actually, if you choose to include RAM, that means you're going to get a snapshot that will include this state in memory as well, which could actually be really cool. It could be very useful. You can have a snapshot that not only includes the disk, but the current state of the disk, as well as RAM. Now, I'm going to uncheck this because I don't really need that for this demonstration. I'll just click Take Snapshot, and let's see the process. And as you can see, it's fast. That was really quick. The snapshots generally are very quick. That's one of the benefits. And we have the snapshot right here. It tells us when the snapshot was created. And I didn't change anything on the virtual machine, but I did create a snapshot. So what I can do now is actually change something on the VM and then see how to revert that change. First of all, I do need to know the IP address so I can go ahead and connect to it. I prefer to use SSH when I can. And there we have the IP address. So what I'll do is switch over to a terminal. now I'm connected to the virtual machine. So what I'm going to do is remove Apache. To be on the safe side, I'll have the purge option, and I'm going to remove the Apache 2 package. Before I do that though, I'll just open up a new tab here, and I'll prove that Apache is currently working. And there's the default start page. So far so good. So, back here in the terminal, what I'm going to do is complete this command right here. And now Apache is uninstalled. If you don't believe me, what I'll do is refresh this page, and of course it doesn't work. Now, what I'm going to try to do here is install Nginx instead, so I'll run sudo apt install Nginx, just like that. You don't have to follow along with this, it's just an example.
How about getting your shipping rates calculated in 30 seconds? How about quick quotes?
Let's refresh the page. And now we have the Nginx start page. So I've successfully switched this particular server from Apache over to Nginx. Now the thing is, I don't actually have a preference between the two, but I wanted to give you guys something different, and Nginx is something different compared to what we had before. So we have Nginx here. What if I wanted to revert the change that I just made? I did create a snapshot before I did anything basically, so I'll click right here. I'll go over to snapshots, and what I want to do is roll this back. I'll confirm it. It tells me that it's done. So let's click over to the console. And since I didn't choose to include RAM, the state of the machine was not saved, so I will need to start it up again. We'll just wait for it to boot up. And now it's started. So if I go right here and refresh the page, we're back to Apache. So you can immediately see the value of snapshots. You can test something and then revert it back. And that's a very powerful ability to have. As an administrator of virtual machines, you will definitely find yourself doing this quite a bit. So snapshots, for the most part, are fairly self-explanatory. Let's go ahead and move on to backups. When we create a backup of a virtual machine, there's a few other options that we could choose. So it's not incredibly complex, but there's a few other options here. So what I'm going to do is click Backup Now. And as you can see, we have additional options. Right here, we can choose where we want this particular backup to go. I only have local storage right here. Now, as an aside, LVM Thin, which is the storage that I've been using for virtual machine disks, that's not listed here. But for right now, I only have this one option. I don't have all that much space here, so that's not great. That's why it's probably a good idea to store the backup somewhere else. But actually, it's always a good idea to store the backup somewhere else. I mean, if you are keeping all of your backups here on Proxmox itself, and then Proxmox goes down, maybe your disk goes bad or something like that, well, if that's the case, you lose the backups as well. So even though it's called a backup in this case, I don't really consider it a backup if it's not somewhere else. But again, we'll get to shared storage later in the series, so we're not going to worry about that aspect so much right now. Now we have several options right here as far as how the backup is going to be captured. We have snapshot mode, suspend mode, and stop mode. Which of these should you actually choose? So each of these different modes pertains to how much downtime you're willing to have. If you have a virtual machine that absolutely cannot go down for any reason, that's going to limit your options quite a bit. Now, at the expense of less downtime, you're actually increasing the possibility for disk corruption. It's incredibly uncommon, but it could happen. Think of it this way. If you are creating a backup of a disk, and that disk has open files and files are being written to, and if you take a backup in the middle of a file being written to, it's possible that maybe data hasn't finished writing when the backup is created, so there could be some integrity problems there. However, in the back end of Proxmox itself, it has some magic and some kung fu, basically, that it tries to do to eliminate problems like that. It's still a possibility, it's unlikely, but just keep in mind that these options generally pertain to how much downtime you're going to have, And more downtime in this case means better integrity. It's kind of like a trade-off. So let's go for stop mode first. If we set it to stop mode, that's actually going to stop the VM. And I literally mean shutdown. It's going to execute an orderly shutdown of the virtual machine and then create a backup. That also means that your backup, if you choose this option, will have the best consistency. And once the virtual machine is shut down, a backend process within Proxmox will kick off and create the backup. If the virtual machine was running when you kicked off the backup process, then once it's done, it's going to start the VM for you. If the VM was stopped when you created the backup, then it won't do that. So that's the stop option. We also have an option for suspend mode as well. Now the Proxmox documentation actually doesn't like or recommend this option because it results in the greatest amount of downtime. In my opinion, whether or not this is actually a good or bad option depends on the use case and the importance level of the virtual machine. If it's not really a big deal to suspend it for a while, then I don't really see anything wrong with it. Now you can think of suspend like suspend on your laptop or your desktop. A lot of laptops and desktops will go into suspend mode when you don't press any keys for a certain amount of time. And then to resume the computer, you just press any key or press the power button and it comes back to life. In suspend mode, in that case, your laptop or desktop will resume exactly where you left off. You can think of suspend mode here as pretty much exactly the same thing. It's going to put your VM into suspend mode, and once it is, it's going to create the backup. And once the backup is done, it's going to resume the VM. Now the virtual machine will not be accessible at all while the backup is happening in suspend mode. Just keep that in mind. But being in suspend mode does actually increase the consistency of the backup, so the trade-off might be worth it. Another option that we have here is snapshot mode, and that's a little confusing. We just went over snapshots. That's the option right here. Now I'm going over backups. So why is there a snapshot option for a backup? Now the snapshot mode isn't actually the same thing as snapshots like I've gone over in the past. This is a specific mode of the backup feature. And this actually results in the least amount of downtime when it comes to backups. So if you're able to use this option, it's the one that I recommend. Now, in a nutshell, the way a snapshot mode backup actually works is that once you kick it off, Proxmox is going to create a backend process in the system itself that's going to do a live backup of that VM, and that's going to actually capture data blocks while the VM is running. If you have the QEMU agent installed, then it's actually going to increase the consistency of the backup, which is yet another reason to make sure that all of your VMs actually have that installed. So on my end, that's actually the option I'm going to go with. I'll click backup, and let's see the process play out. Now the process is finished, but if you take a look at the output, something that you'll see here that's fairly interesting, you can see that the QEMU agent executed a file system freeze command, and that's helpful because, again, that's going to improve consistency. So it's in snapshot mode. It's going to freeze the file system, and then it's going to resume the VM, and then create the backup, like you can see right here. So if this option works out for you, I highly recommend that you choose that particular option when you create your backup. And then right here, we have the backup. So I could click restore if I wanted to restore that snapshot, and even though I didn't actually change anything, I'll just go ahead and do it, just so you can see what it looks like. And I'm going to leave everything here. I mean, you could choose a different storage if you wanted to, but I'm going to leave it at the default, which is essentially just going to restore the backup where the original already is. So I'll just click restore, and I'll say yes. And right now, it's actually complaining that the VM is running, so what I'm going to need to do is actually shut it down. Now that it's shut down, let's try that again. I'll click restore. I'll leave the storage option here alone. But what I am going to do is check this box right here because I do want this VM to start as soon as it's done restoring. So I'll click restore. I'll confirm it. And now it's restoring. And as you can see, the process is finished. And the VM is starting up. So after the backup is restored, it did exactly as I asked it to do and started the VM. So that part's pretty simple. Now the thing is, backups are great, but if you don't actually have this automated, then, well, I mean, you'll probably forget. We're all human. I know I would. So if you go here to Data Center View, before we were just clicking on VMs and running backups and snapshots within the VM settings, but the Data Center View, like I mentioned earlier in this series, pertains to every server and every VM. So if I go to the backup options here underneath Data Center, then what I can do is add a task. And this is going to allow me to create a backup job. This is how you automate backups. These settings here, like I mentioned, allow you to...
Alright, I think it's time to end this game. I'm going to use my Mommy Peacebringer.
Today's video is sponsored by CrowdSec. CrowdSec is an open source and collaborative intrusion protection system that brings a whole new meaning to the phrase, knowledge is power. This solution protects your servers by blocking unwanted behaviors, including but not limited to port scans, cross-site scripting, brute forcing, and more. And it does this in a very exciting way by making security a community effort rather than a personal one. You've no doubt seen the impact that collaborative processes have had on businesses and end users, But have you ever seen a collaborative security solution? Well, neither have I, until now. And that's what CrowdSec is. It's an intrusion prevention solution that takes real security events into account and leverages that information to enhance the protection of your servers. Whenever CrowdSec prevents an intrusion attempt on your server, it actually allows all the other servers out there in the wild to benefit from that as well. Because anytime a server with CrowdSec installed sees an intrusion attempt, it helps other servers also prevent attacks from that same IP. And one of the best things about CrowdSec is that they follow a scientific, community-based approach to help make the industry better and safer for everyone. By just installing a few packages, you can start protecting your servers immediately. And the best part about this is that CrowdSec is free. And by free, I mean actually free. Not free for a certain number of servers. There's no trial period. You can literally install it right now without so much as signing up anywhere. To get started, all you have to do is simply link that I did on this video. And that's really important. Integrated firewall and a Proxmox, but it doesn't hurt to have a firewall feature within Proxmox itself, and it's worth checking out. Setting up a firewall is very important, so if you don't already have a solution, the Proxmox firewall is pretty effective. And configuring firewall rules is almost like an art form, especially when it comes to administrators that are into that kind of thing. But even if it's not your cup of tea, it's still a very important thing, and we're going to explore it in this video. We're going to take a look at the integrated firewall feature of Proxmox in more detail. So, let's do that. Alright, so let's start exploring firewalls. Now the first thing that's probably the most confusing to newcomers is that there's firewall settings, well, all over the place. Right now I have the host highlighted, EVE1, and you can see that we have a firewall section here. If I click on a container, we have a firewall section. If I click on a VM, you guessed it, we have a firewall section. If I click on data center, we also have a firewall section. So if you want to add some firewall rules, where should you put those firewall rules? That's what I'm hoping to break down in this video. I'm going to show you exactly where you need to create those rules. Now, first and foremost, it's easy to think about this as a top-down kind of view. So if you add a firewall rule here to data center, it's going to apply to the data center. If you add your firewall rules here underneath the host, then those firewall rules are going to apply to the host. Same for containers and VMs. So where you create those rules kind of depends on where you want that abstracted. Now the thing is though, none of what I just said will actually matter if firewalls are disabled altogether. So here I am on data center view, and underneath firewall and then options, firewall is set to no. Now you shouldn't actually enable the firewall just yet. Just understand so far that when the firewall is turned off, it doesn't work. But if you turn it on without actually creating firewall rules, then the issue is going to be that you'll lose access to the Proxmox web console, and we don't want that. Now you don't actually have to follow along with what I'm about to do, but what I am going to do is lock myself out on purpose, which is why I don't want you to follow along. I think seeing this will help you understand how the firewall actually works. So what I'm going to do is edit this. I'm not going to save it just yet. I'm going to drop down to a terminal, and I'm going to start a ping to the Proxmox host itself. And now we can see that the ping is happening. And back up here in the web console, again, don't follow along with what I'm doing. I'm going to enable the firewall, click OK, and then if I go back down to the terminal, nothing is happening. The ping has stopped. And now I have a connection error. I've actually lost access to the web console. I can't click on anything. Nothing is actually going to work. It's just going to load, and I can't actually disable the firewall here. So again, I'm locked out. But thankfully, on my end, I have an easy solution for that. I can actually just access the IP of my console, which I'll do right now. And then I'll go to remote control. And now I have a terminal right here I can use to re-enable my access to the web console. And thankfully, that's actually easy to do. I can run nano, or whatever text editor I want, it doesn't really matter. And the file that I want to edit is /etc, and then /pve, firewall, and then cluster.fw. So this config file right here allows me to enable or disable the firewall for the entire cluster. It's enabled right now, so I'm going to change that to a 0. And this is nano, so we have our options down here as far as saving files and whatnot. I'm just going to save it, Control-O, then Enter, and then Control-X. And that should be everything that I'll need to do. Now I have access to the web console again. Notice that the connection error is gone. If I go down here, my pings have resumed, so I have restored access to the server. That's pretty cool. So, what you just saw was me locking myself out on purpose. And that just goes to show you that when you enable the firewall in Data Center View, it's going to enable it for better or worse. So we shouldn't actually enable the firewall until we have the rules created that are important for us to retain access to the server. The default policy right here is to drop traffic. This is the input policy, and it's going to drop everything incoming. And that's why I lost access. The default is to drop, and, well, it dropped my traffic. So I guess you could say that it works. Now, what I want to do is create some rules here, just to show you some examples. So I'll click on Firewall, and I'll add a rule. So for incoming, I'm going to leave it on accept, which is what it is. I'm going to enable this particular rule. The interface, I'm going to set it to VMDR0. That's the default bridge that Roxbox uses. If that's different on your end, you might have to type a different interface name here. For the source, I'm going to leave this blank right here. But if I did want to set a particular source, like an IP address, I can do that here. But what I want to do is actually select the protocol. I'll select TCP. And the destination port is 8006. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm trying to create a rule right here, which is going to accept traffic that is going to port 8006. You'll notice that 8006 is in the address bar right here. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm creating a rule that is going to allow access to the web console. I didn't actually type a source or a destination. So right now, I'm allowing everyone access to the console. In the future, I'll probably want to dial that down and not allow everyone in. But I think it's good enough for now. I'm going to add this rule. And now it's here. Now I'm not actually going to lose access or anything because the firewall itself is disabled. As you recall, when I enabled this, I lost access pretty much immediately. But now I have a rule that's going to, hypothetically, or at least I hope, allow me access to the web console. So let's go ahead and enable the firewall right now and see what happens. I'll give it a few seconds. Let's see if I lose access. To be on the safe side, I'm going to click on something else. Now so far, it doesn't look like I lost access. I can still click on things. That's a really good sign. If I go back down here to the terminal, well, I did lose access to Ping, but you know what? That's actually okay because I do have access to the web console, and I knew this would happen. Because the thing is, when I clicked on Firewall right here for the data center, I created this rule right here, which is allowing me, or pretty much everyone, access to port 8006, which is, of course, the web console. But that does not imply access to Ping or ICMP traffic. So what I can do is add yet another rule. I'll set it to accept, and for the protocol, I'll set it to ICMP. Now let's have a little bit of fun. I want to allow only my laptop to ping the server. That's /32, and the /32 limits the scope to that one IP address. So far so good. I'll enable the rule. So we have another rule right here. Actually, I should have put the interface here. Let me go ahead and adjust that. Click OK, and let's drop down. And as you can see, pings are restored. So let's go ahead and SSH into the server. Let's see if that works. It won't. So what I'm going to do is attempt an SSH connection to PVE1, which obviously won't work. It's just going to time out, as expected. So to allow my laptop access, what I need to do is add yet another rule.
Introducing the English test designed for you. Convenient, fast.
So protocol is going to be TCP. Destination port is going to be 22. That is the port for SSH. And actually, I click up here, and then scroll down. This is even easier. Instead of manually creating it, what I can do is click on SSH right here. And then for the source, I'll type in yet again the IP address to my laptop. I'll enable the rule, click add. So we have another rule here. I'm going to cancel out of this connection attempt right here and try it again. And would you look at this, it's working. Now I'm not going to actually connect via SSH, we'll cover that later. But we can see that it's working, it's asking for my password. If it wasn't working, it would just continue to time out. So that does mean that the firewall rule that I created is actually working. Now let's see how this is actually abstracted when I go down another layer. I'm going to actually create some rules here under PVE1. But before I do that, I want to remove this rule right here. And now it's gone. And that should also mean that I won't be able to SSH into that server anymore. And as you can see, I'm no longer able to use SSH to connect to that server. That's expected. So what I'm going to do under PVE1 is create that particular rule. I'm already on the firewall section, so I'm going to add a rule. I'm going to accept. Let's just use the macro of SSH because that's easier to do. So I'll select that. When I can find it, there it is. Let's enable it. And again, I'll type in my IP address right here. And there it is. So the interface, VMDR0, and again, let's add it. And it's added. Let's cancel out of this. Let's try that again. And now it works. So what just happened here? Now so far we understand that in order for any firewalls to work at all, you have to go here on the data center view to firewall and then options. you then enable it. But you shouldn't actually enable it until you've created the rules that you intend on creating. So in the actual firewall section here, I have some rules here that allow me access to the server. So this rule here, ICMP, allows me to ping the server. So this is going to apply data center wide. So if I add yet another host here, this rule is going to allow me to ping that host as well. So this saves me from manually adding this rule right here to every single host. Just makes things a little bit easier. And the same is true for this rule right here. It allows me access to the web console
Ada yang demo di situ.
because the web console runs on port 8006. Now, on another level, I did have an SSH option here. That's not here now. I created that here under PVE1. And that's why I'm able to SSH into PVE1. If I add another server to the cluster, this rule will not be present because I created this rule underneath this particular host. So it applies to this particular host. It's not going to apply to PVE2 when I go to add that. If I did want it to apply to the entire data center, I should have created that rule up here in data center. But because I didn't, it applies only to this server. And now that I've added it, I am able to SSH into the server. Now, we do have this particular server here. If I go back to the console, what is the IP address? Let's see. I'll log in. And I'll type the right password this time. And now I'm in, so what's the IP address? 249.250. So what I'm going to do is attempt to SSH directly into the virtual machine. And it actually works. As you can see, I was able to SSH directly into the server. So what I'm going to do is actually remove this rule right here. And now it's gone. And sometimes it needs a few seconds to apply. But anyway, I'm going to try to connect to that particular virtual machine one more time here. And it still works. Why does that still work? Let's actually make sure that it still works, because again, it takes some time for firewall rules to apply. I did remove it. It still works. So when you get to this level, if I add a firewall rule to PVE1, it applies to PVE1. But here on the web server, underneath firewall, firewall is disabled. And the reason why I was able to SSH into the web server, despite the fact that I removed the firewall, is because the firewall was disabled on web server 1. So I just enabled that. I'll enable it here as well. And it's enabled. So what that should mean then is I should not be able to SSH into that server if I go to try it again. And as you can see, I'm not able to do that. If I go back up here to PVE1 and re-add that firewall rule that I had here previously, I'll set it to VMVR0. I'll enable it. Now that's enabled. Let's cancel out of here. And let's run a little experiment. Do you think it's going to work? I'll give it a few seconds to make sure that all the firewall changes.
2M Pak.
Berapa?
2M.
Semangat Pak. Saya semua sekali lagi Pak. Mau yang alami lagi Pak.
Wih, Peter serang sekali Pak. Tentang.
Saya dapat jual satu tempat di bekas terus.
Teman sering dengar kan potongan
Gokil guys, punya bisnis lain kita langsung instant profit. Berapa bits ini? 100 ribu bits atau profit nih? Kita jackpot guys sambil lihat. Gokil guys, punya bisnis lain kita langsung instant profit. Berapa bits ini? 100 ribu bits atau profit nih? Gokil, gokil. Gila, kita satu kawanan jackpot guys sambil lihat.
I got 8 cookies here, 7 of which are normal, 1 of which is a little thicker.
Nah, kita lihat para teman-teman, Avatar sedang main layang-layang. Avatar goblok. Avatar layang-layang. Kita main alam baru goblok. Lagi Avatar bisa layangan lah model zaman Siki kan kepret. Bella. Cuma cantik aja lu. Ini makin saya budaya, gemoy. Bel. 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 Bel.
aja loh. Kapan hijrah? Hijrah yuk. Sholat Jumat yuk. Ayo. Ayo sholat Jumat yuk. Aku udah sanggup. Bye-bye Bella.
Duluan ya semuanya. semuanya. Hari
Ya. Itu lagi kapsa pindah BBC tadi. Kampungnya hujan pak.
Wih pak, semalam
ini jam berapa? Jam 6:30 pak, 6:30 pagi.
Take you over, you just can't.